So today, last session, you guys have had such a fantastic amount of information thrown at you. So hopefully this last panel will allow you to see some really fantastic producers who are making the content. And what we want to do is, rather than talk about the marketplace, I mean, we will get into that, but hear the insights of these people about their own ways that they connected with kids. So to take us into the session, since we talk about storytelling for kids, I wanted to just give you a little connection that we recently had, which kind of, for me, as I talked about earlier for people who was there, that, you know, there's this television or storytelling through film, this medium that we do, it's a canvas and we're connecting to the world. So here, these are just some drawings that my kids have done. Kids are natural storytellers. We're all natural storytellers, but I think as we get older, we become a bit more inhibited by letting that freedom of storytelling go. And here's just, that's my son who's 8 down there. He obviously loves superheroes. He's really into that. And my daughter, she's 11 and she's a little bit more refined. But all of those, just in their little doodles, are just little characters in little worlds. In their own little way, they're creating stories within their own worlds. So I want to just share this little letter that I received from through our info at SLR. So hello at SLR Productions. Not sure how to do this, I've never done it before, but I just felt compelled to make contact with you there to let you know how your fantastic creation, The Invincibles, which is a show we made, an Italian co-production, has affected our son Mark. Mark is 11 years of age and has autism. He has lots of learning difficulties, but he doesn't let that stop him. Over the last couple of months, he has become somewhat enamoured, who am I kidding, totally obsessed with The Invincibles, I mean really obsessed. Whatever it is about the characters, and I'll just go over to... That's the show, The Invincibles. It's basically a show where there's a society of very bad villains and Cuba, who's this Picasso-inspired character, has this thing called Spray Alive, and he can bring to life anything, and he brings to life all these great works of art, and that's kind of the mechanism of the series. So whatever it is about the characters, especially Pablo, who's part of this, he's there, the slacker, it's really caught his imagination, despite not being available to watch it here in Ireland. He watches it over the internet, so he found it on YouTube in Italian to begin with, and then searched it out. He draws lots and lots of pictures and has become somewhat obsessed. So he made a whole lot of homages by ripping our stuff as a fan does. He also commissioned Badgett, his mother, and Big Sister, to make a comic for him about Invincibles, which he called Art to the Rescue. They had to draw 16 pages of the strip, and it took them over a week to complete. And he reads it every night as his bedtime story. He also, so I do apologise if there's an element of plagiarism, but the only profit garnered is that Mark is taking great inspiration from your series, and it's really helping him develop and using his imagination. You've really helped a young autistic lad break through some of those barriers with your series, and you should be very much congratulated for that. I mean, to me, that's just a gold. It's why we do stuff. But he then went on to send me his ideas for the next series. So he took our characters. Is that still working?
No, we've lost you.
He took our characters and put them into his own world. He also sent us some ideas for the next series, where he told us all the new characters we should create. Changed our characters slightly. He felt that they could be changed into other characters. If only he was the broadcaster. He's got a new series for us next year, and he's changed the characters a little bit because he felt like they could evolve. There he is there. So we sent him, since he was only watching ripped off episodes on YouTube, we sent him some series, the Bible. We sent him the Bible, and we sent him some episodes. And then he just recently sent me this. He thought, what about if Uncle Leo became a woman? So that was, I said, keep sending to me, Mark. That's great. But what I wanted to share with you is that, you know, you connect with an idea and you don't know where that idea is going to go, but if you can connect in a big way. If your way in is kind of a big idea, and using this as a way into our panels, whether your big idea is, am I good enough to go to a school and live my dream? What would it be like to be in a parallel world and explore things with someone who is going to take me there? What would 3 slacker, crazy teenagers from a crazy place somewhere in Eastern Europe, maybe, Broxtonia, do if they just could do anything? And what if children were driving their own narratives in their own world? So there's 4 ways in, and we've got a fantastic panel here today who are going to share some of their connecting stories or series ideas that have allowed them to connect with their audience. So we have, I'll introduce, we have Jason Critelli, who's the Managing Director of Media Farm. We have Stu Connolly, Head of Animation from Sticky Pictures. Joanna Werner, who's the Executive Producer from Werner Film Productions, and Jim Ballantine, the Managing Director of Flying Bar Productions. And they have fantastic bios, but you can read those in the book. So first of all, I wanted to throw over to each of our very esteemed panel to actually give a little insight and let them have the floor for a bit to tell us about a way in which they've connected. And they've all connected in a very different way. So first up, Stu, I want to talk to you about comedy, because comedy is obviously very important to you. You never really grew up and connect with children very well. So yeah, I want you to talk and let us know about how you connect through comedy.
Do I speak in here?
You can speak.
I can just sit here?
Yeah. Do you want the clicker?
Sounds fine.
I came into being a scriptwriter through music journalism, but I had a good friend who would often draw pictures, and he started an animation. But I came into that through creative. We would read Asterix books and other things, and we, as you could see, never really grew up. But everything that we've ever done, and it includes now with my company Sticky Pictures, always has comedy in there. But I think that's always, it's about how making us laugh than any other thing. I read this quote from Neville Astley, one of the Peppa Pig creators.
That pig again.
I know. But I thought it was a good way to sum up. And he said that, I'm proud to say we did no research into the preschool market, no child psychologist, and we didn't even have our own children at that point. We literally based it on what we remembered when we were kids back in the 60s. And that's the way we have written and animated it since, mainly making something that we would enjoy. And everything that I've done, I've started sort of from that point. I was talking about that question with the co-creator of the Dukes the other day, and Seren, and he was convinced that we came up with ideas that would connect to the audience, but it was like, no, we just made ourselves laugh, and that was, staying core to the idea initially.
Yeah. Fantastic. So you're going to show us something that is funny, I think, were you?
Oh, maybe a little later.
Maybe later?
Yeah.
Okay,
I better do it now.
There you go, it's all there ready. Let's talk about somehow that your comedy works.
I'm pointing it.
Oh.
I was just, as a background, these are some of the...
Are you going to press the actual arrows left and right?
Oh.
Yeah.
Some of the shows we've done, which include live action and animation. And the current show we're working on now is called Pirate Express, which is about Newt, who's the son of Poseidon. He's the Lord of the Sea. That's his assistant, Gordon. And unwittingly, Newt releases a whole bunch of pirates out of a glass bottle and becomes the captain of the pirate ship. And there's just a little clip.
Well, this is the place. This be madness. The Cyclops have tiny brains and giant claws. I heard they can crush a man to death with just one mighty swing. You really want to get hit good and hard the first time. Nothing worse than being awake when you're dead and having your arms and fingers being nibbled on by a giant.
Bah! Such a fate means nothing to Armando. Passion requires no fingers. Gretchen's eye calls to me. I yearn for the warmth of the unibrow.
May as well have to keep going now, don't we? Yeah. This is a new show we've started production on called Winston Steinberg and Dudley Ding Dong for the ABC. And it's about a boy, his pet cat, who thinks he's a dog in space, and that's his guardian Hampton, who's a half hamster, half alien. And we've kicked off in production now, you can see that. And another one we're in development with the ABC and also Disney US about two boys who have a cooking show. That started as an older skewing show. It was more like Cheech and Chong, but we've sort of aged it down. We're also in development with on live action, which is a sitcom with Bindi Owen about a girl who moves to a big city and discovers she has, like Dr. Dolittle, has the ability to communicate with animals. And this is the last series clip I'll show you. And the core of that idea was, boys who find 80s tracksuits in a vintage store and then discover that they're alien battle suits. But they have, what they want to do is breakdance. So that's a series we're in development with a Canadian company, Nerdcore.
So that's
it's all comedy.
It is comedy, and he's, as you can tell, he's just a cracker funny kind of guy. But Stu, obviously the quality of those shows are fantastic, but one of the things that you've been able to align yourselves with is working with Canadians who actually bring in that fantastic quality of animation, because of their need to have competed against America. The US content has allowed them to really refine that animation.
They can be funny too.
No, that's what I was going to ask. So working funny across the seas, how do you find that funny work? So do we laugh at the same things?
I definitely with Canada, I think we're generally on the same page. Although if I remember a note on Pearly where we had said that the elf jumped out of a pot plant, and I got this whole page of notes from the director over there. Just we can't promote drugs on screen. What? And then they call it potted plant. So there's just tiny little subtle differences that can come through. And these guys could speak more about
of working that. Well, I mean, working with comedy and sending scripts into broadcasters from different places, do you find that the comedy can get affected by the different notes coming from different places? How do you protect the comedy?
I think what Daly said before, that actually if you're not communicating your idea well enough, that's when you're going to get those notes. He said it in reverse, but I thought it was actually, I was just going to steal that line for that answer.
Oh.
But everybody involved generally wants to make the best show possible, and it's their baby too. And sometimes I have to kind of remind myself of that. When you're getting a note you don't agree with, it's like, it's not just my thing.
Yeah.
So
that's working with.
Yeah.
And in terms then of that, we've talked a bit about different sessions about your audience. That kind of comedy, what is the sweet spot for that particular style of comedy that the last few shows are? Where is that working? Which part of the audience?
I think sometimes you don't really know. And say our series, The Dukes of Broxtonia, which is a ABC3 and Cartoon Network Asia, but next weekend it's playing in the late night bazaar section of the Melbourne Animation Festival. And that's something, I'm really proud of. It's been in there 4 times, but it's also a kids show, and so, the team is really excited about that as well, because it sits with adult stuff too, and it makes them laugh too. So that was, that's my little email letter. But I also got a complaint that we were promoting cigarettes because they were cigarette shaped. I didn't get a nice email.
About branding.
Yeah, branding.
Brand removal.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Stu, and I'm sure we'll come back to you. But we might shift across here to Jason, who is in a more non-traditional space and has kind of been sitting more on the fringes, being innovative, finding ways to connect. And you're going to talk to us about how you connect in a non-traditional way.
Yeah, we'll just let PowerPoint up.
Oh, this is Jason.
So Media Farm. So, just a bit about us. We've been around since about 2003. We work primarily in the we work primarily in the corporate sector. as well as broadcast sector, and we also work in the e-learning sector as well. So we've kind of got a wide client base. Here are some of the shows we've done. A lot of our stuff is pretty much live action, adventure reality, some magazine style, but pretty much all in the kids space. Funnily enough, our first show we got up was actually a documentary for Channel 10, and then we got up an interstitial show with Nickelodeon, and we kind of fell into the kids space, and it kind of sort of went from there. And then a while ago, we were just sort of looking at new ways to actually connect with kids, and we were sent this little video by the daughter of the producer of The Tunnel, and I'll just play it for you. Well, it was actually sent by her mother.
Once upon a time, there was a little dog. There was a little dog looking for a bone. He couldn't find them. He did everywhere. He couldn't find it. So he goes to his mother. I couldn't find, and he said, I couldn't find any bones. So he did everywhere. He found a big one and a little one. So he came to his mum and he said, Mum, I found a little one and a big one. And he was really happy with his mum. The end.
Now, most people would look at that and think it's a story about a bone, but we looked at it and thought, wow, this is a pretty well-structured story for a 4-year-old. And it's actually about perseverance. And, one of the things that drives us is this quote, and you were talking about this a little bit earlier. We all have an ability to tell stories. And so we wanted to provide kids with a platform and give them the tools where they could nurture this ability. So what we did is we created a storytelling platform called Junior Storytellers, and it's an iPad app and a website, and basically it allows kids to create and share their own animated stories. And I'll just play the promo bit here.
Let's learn how to make a story.
Every good story starts with a setting and a hero.
There are so many fun things you can do to make your story the best it can be. Let's get started.
And the horse jumped really high. It was so beautiful. 1, 2, 3, let's go!
The monster roared.
La 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 la.
Create your own hero.
Choose your challenge level.
In this level, you tell a 3-page story with a beginning, middle, and end. Here's something fun. You can change your character's emotions.
The lion was very happy with this puzzle.
Share your story. Junior Storytellers. Create and share your own stories.
Fantastic.
So we've created this platform, and we designed a whole bunch of story worlds. We've got 8, and the other thing that we did is we made this platform rebrandable and reskinnable, so we could offer it to publishers and broadcasters, so they could have kids connect with their titles. So, it's only just been released, and it's getting some fantastic reviews, and subject to a couple of technical difficulties, if we can overcome those, it'll be piloted throughout the state schools in Queensland. So it's on its way, and it just offers kids a different. It offers them a way to be active in the storytelling as opposed to watching TV and being a passive viewer.
Fantastic. As a parent, I can see that, and I think I've been shown this app, and there's the ability to record as you go, so you actually can create the narrative and can move the characters, and they're very flexible. So they can then record the story and watch it back, make edits. So they've become, in a very simple way, and it's appealing to kids that, what is the youngest age of the...
So we've tested it with probably over 100 kids, and its real sweet spot is 6 to 7 year olds. It works for kids as low as 4 and as old as 9.
Fantastic. So we talked a bit earlier, you've very kindly put some stats together about how this shift into a digital world, away from this traditional linear television or way of storytelling, how's it affected the way that they're viewing the content and being part of the stories?
TV is still dominant by a long shot. here's some statistics. I mean, this is what kids do in their spare time. This is research from Cartoon Network. And, you know, when I look at this, I think, man, that's unhealthy. I mean, over 50% of their time is spent in front of the screen. So, you know, it's quite surprising, but kids are consuming media at an unbelievable rate. And, you know, TV is still by far the dominant medium, but children are now using apps more than ever. We've got some statistics on smartphones and how they penetrate the Australian household, as well as tablets. And you probably can't see this, so it might be a little bit difficult, but this is the latest report from Oztam, I believe, and it just sort of shows the media usage across all the age groups. But I mean, you can see the children; it's the first one there. It's incredibly dominant. So this is what they're saying from their research. You know, 27% of kids, you know, have 4 screens in their house, and so I think TV is still dominant by a long shot. But because, you know, when you're at home, at the end of the day, kids want to watch their shows on the biggest screen. So I think devices, they are increasing in usage, but they're being used more outside of the home. So when parents are going shopping and they want to entertain their kids, or in the back of the car, or, you know, when they're travelling. I mean, I know that, you know, every time I go shopping and my 2-year-old's in the shopping trolley, I have to hand him the phone with Peppa Pig or other shows on it, because otherwise he won't stay, you know, he won't stay still. So I think parents are using devices in that way.
Do you have any more slides there, or is there?
And the only one is just sort of that the last question you had there is how young are the kids, and what age do they start engaging? Well, this is from Common Sense Media out of the US, and I just got this today, but this is really interesting. So, I mean, you know, that's a massive stat. I mean, so kids as young as, you know, as 2 are, you know, engaging with content. So, you know, they're getting there early, and you know, as a parent myself, and you know, with my 2-year-old, I mean, I'm amazed at what he can do on the iPad at his age. So, you know, it's just second nature to them now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that is, you know, the notion of storytelling, and I think what's really interesting about that, the Junior Storyteller app, is the way that actually it builds their understanding of the narrative. Exactly what we were talking about in making a pitch Bible is understanding how stories are told. And obviously there's non-traditional narratives, and as we get older we break those moulds because we want to find a different way of connecting with us as adults. But that traditional, you build a story, you have a hero, they have a problem, you have to solve the problem, that builds as they build through the levels. So their ability to understand the complexity of the narrative is increasing as they tell their own stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we did is we, when we did the testing, we realised that there are kids that gravitate towards building a story you know, with all those fundamental building blocks, and there's other kids who just want to go wild and, you know, and create their own stories without any instruction. So we created 2 modes. One is sandbox mode, which, you know, just allows kids to create stories for as long as they like, as many pages as they like. And the other one is level mode, and each level introduces them to a new fundamental or some fundamental storytelling building blocks, like, you know, who is your hero, where is your story set, what does your hero want, what is their want, why do they want it, where do they have to go to get it, what obstacles and challenges do they have to overcome, and how do they resolve, you know, their story. So, you know, we guide them through that process with video tutorials.
I think you're going to put us all out of a job, though, with these such good storytellers. So thank you, Jason. That's fantastic, and good luck with that app.
Thank you.
I hope it does well for you. So I'm going to switch over to Joanna Werner, who we're fantastic to hear her point of view, connecting with such a, was it a breakout show? It was a show that needed to be told, and it was really the gold and the sapphire, the jewel of ABC when it launched into the marketplace, and it really made its connection with the audience. You know, there was a new platform which was just for them, and there was Dance Academy, which actually was a story uniquely told just for that audience. So, yeah, you can talk to us about connecting with real stories.
Yeah, for me it definitely comes from a place of being passionate about the story that you want to tell, and for me I couldn't have hoped for any show to be the first one that I produced with my own company than this one, and it started off from that question. I was producing a series for my old boss, Jonathan Schiff. We were a series called H2O, Just Add Water, fabulous series, and I was at pre-shoot drinks with the casting assistant who I'd become friends with, and we're on our whatever bottle of wine at 2 a.m, and she asked me, what would be the show that you want to, what would be your ideal dream show to make? And I said, well, been wanting to do this for years. I want to make a series about a girl from the country who gets in the top ballet school and follows her dreams about trying to get in the Australian Ballet Company. And she said shut up, she thought I was joking, and she the next day gave me a script that she'd been working on for 3 years, which was about a girl from the country who got in the top ballet school and follows her dreams to try to become a ballerina in the company. And but not only was the passion and integrity behind the story mutually shared, the way that the story was told, it was progressive and it was a little edgier and it had beautiful heart, and so she'd never written anything before, so to me it's quite unheard of, but just beautiful. So we worked on it together for a number of years until it became absolutely the show that we desperately wanted to make, and also that we knew that we were the exact right people to make it, which is also an intimidating question, because of course there are many, many more experienced producers than I was then and am now. But I knew for this series I was the right person to produce it, and I knew that Sam was the right person to write it. So we were able to, with all sincerity, pitch ourselves to the network and the series, because it was our dream show. And luckily they loved it too, and Germany loved it too, and we got the show up and then had this opportunity to make the series, and which is a little bit scary at first, but then we just knew this was the show that we not only desperately wanted to watch when we were 12, 13, 14, 15, it was the show that we desperately wanted to watch now. So we just made the show that we wanted to watch. So we made the first series, and fantastically we went straight into the second series, and then we had to fight tooth and nail to get the third series up, because there are limitations to access to funding beyond a second series. But for us, the dream had always been that it was a 3-series show, because they get in year 10, and then if they graduate in equivalent of year 12 and either get into the company or not. It's based on the model of the Australian Ballet School. So when we were told, and there's no guarantees that we were going to get the third series up, and we finished the second series on a pretty massive cliffhanger, which was kind of designed in a way to emotionally blackmail the networks into having this third series. And we'd killed a character and nobody knew if anyone was coming back, and there was no resolution. So when I was told at a meeting with Screen Australia that the third series wasn't going to happen, it was like I literally had to, take a deep breath. Nobody wants to cry in a meeting, and I just said, you can't do that to our characters or the audience.
You have a right to tell the rest of the story.
Absolutely. It would have been, the whole series would have been a failure and a disaster, and we would have ripped off our audience had we not got the chance to finish it. So to me, the most gratifying thing we ever got to do was to do that third series, and the third series was 13.5 hours as opposed to 26 that the first 2 series were. But we got to tell our story, and we got to have them graduate and tell that complete story. So yeah, that was very gratifying.
That was great. And before we go to a clip, that is an interesting question, because in the marketplace, certainly in the animation space, where you are actually doing self-contained episodes, you're doing lots of them, so the characters start back where they finished. It's kind of more of a classic sitcom. You're having this overriding arc that's happening not only in one season but across 3 seasons. I mean, how did that work outside of Australia? Obviously you needed to tell the story complete, but selling it internationally as a series with a big arc, and for that audience, is that important for them to actually to see characters develop?
Well, we were certainly told, and it is one of the things that you're told with any new development of a story, that the episodes have to be self-contained, that you need to be able to pick up the episode, pick up any episode and be able to tune in and not feel that you have to go back to episode 1. A network needs the opportunity to take a break at episode 6 or 13 or 18 and split the series in that way. We kind of just told the story that we wanted to tell, and whilst we had a few networks at first, but against that, those networks that didn't buy then came back and did buy it. So we knew the story that we wanted to tell. We knew that we needed each series to be self-contained in a way. So first year is about getting into the ballet school and all of those teething and getting in there. Second series is about an international competition that comes to Australia, so that's sort of a resolved storyline. And then the third series is about will they get into the company. So, but the overall arc of the entire series is following their dreams within the school to graduate.
And because the audience you were talking to were a very self-gratifying audience, And you were up in the age group where kids could connect legally, where, you know, I think when you're talking to younger kids, there's Facebook rules. The fans' ownership of that became quite a big part of the stories.
Oh yeah,
didn't it?
when we shut your ears if you don't want to know. When we killed Sammy, we got the audience owned that character. I got death threats. You know, we're going to come into the ABC and kill everyone who worked on Dance Academy and see how you like it. How dare you do this to our character? You don't understand him. Blah blah blah. Not blah blah blah. It was all really bad. But the next episode, when we went into, you know, the feelings and the way that the characters had to band together, then we got lovely letters. But it just showed us how connected the audience were to these characters, and they'd totally taken ownership of the characters.
And that's partly to do with the narrative stories that you put within that as well, that they were real issues. And that connecting to those real issues that the audience could relate to, obviously, made you, the way that you handled those real issues was really important. And
we were so lucky to be able to be one of the first shows ABC3 did, because prior to that, a C rating, we were able to be G and PG on ABC3, and a C rating, I think you really do have struggles with telling 16 and 17-year-old stories in a realistic way. And we originally, when we thought we would have that rating, we made the characters younger, because one of the things that was very important to us was being really true to the experience of the characters and not having 18-year-olds act like 14-year-olds. You know, a 17, if you're doing a series about 17-year-olds, I don't think you can't talk about sex and you can't not talk about alcohol or you know, those sorts of issues. But it's just an added challenge to the writers to be able to tell it in a way that's palatable to our 6-year-olds. So we had an episode where our lead characters were talking about having sex for the first time. We had to discuss it in a way that the 6-year-olds didn't understand, but vaguely got that, you know, that it was about emotional, you know, relationship issues, but they just like the dancing anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
But for our older audience who started with us when they were 14, by the time or 15, by the time we did the third series, they were the same age. They were 18 and 17. They were only going to keep watching it if we were really true to their teen experience.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's an amazing series. If you haven't watched it, get out the 3 set.
Sorry, I told you about Sammy.
All right.
No, but it's great for binge viewing too.
Yes, you've been shooting.
And so,
I've got the trailer of the third
yes,
series,
let's watch the
but
trailer.
can I'm technophobe.
Oh,
can you
technophobe,
press the button?
Thanks.
Third year was always going to be the ultimate endurance test. It was easy to lose perspective because there was this one thought playing over and over. This is the rest of your life.
Some space has temporarily opened up in the Quarter Ballet, so the company are considering taking some third years in for the rest of the Sydney season.
How much space are we talking? What type of dances do they need?
Girls, boys.
So Jeffrey has a list of who fits his vision.
Where am I on the list?
Your legs. He likes them longer.
It really is going to be fun watching you tear each other apart to get a contract.
The favourites are always the ones who deserve it the least. It started way before Sammy, so don't you blame him.
You're miserable in the company, completely out of your depth, and for the first time ever, I'm not just the funny sidekick, and you can't stand that.
A 12-month race to the finish line. And the people who knew us better than anyone else on the planet, our best friends, they were now meant to be the enemy.
Ready to do battle?
The company was always watching. Every moment was a potential audition.
Viva la Sua!
Oh, great.
Oh, lock the door. You're a role model, Lucy. Housekeeping.
Sorry, do you want me to come back?
Yes, please.
No, come in.
Go away, Christian.
You have no reason not to trust me.
My dear boy, never underestimate the power of a first love.
So you toy with people's lives for sport?
That's how it goes sometimes. How stupid would we feel if we turn this off a day?
I don't need the company and I don't need you.
Students outgrow their teachers. It means you're ready.
show. Great Australians too. So,
I'll
that
watch it
leads me
again.
to our esteemed peer, colleague, Jim Ballantine, from Flying Bar Pictures. And I think, Jim, I mean, obviously you've come from the outside in Australia, and you're now an outsider on the inside, looking on the outside.
I've been here 5 years.
You have been here a long time. So, but I thought it would be good to talk about the universality of children as an audience, and what is it that connects us universally, and just your perspective on that.
Oh my God, what a question. Well, look, I mean, we make movies and television shows, and you always have to have the audience in mind. I don't think, I'm really flabbergasted by the statistics of 2-year-olds on tablets, and I do wonder what that's going to do to attention spans and the ability to actually sit through a 22-minute episode. But I still believe in telling those stories, and that's important. And certainly, I don't think movies are less popular than they were when I started in this. I originally started in live theater, so doing a lot of work for young audiences at that time. So it was kind of an interesting leap into animation, because I think of animation being very theatrical and part of that as well. But in terms of the universality of stories, it always comes down to great characters and great stories. I mean, there's nothing really scientific about it, because I think it's about being spontaneous and real. I mean, what we do actually is lie. And it's just how well you tell the lie. We create these worlds where fish are watching TV, but there's a rule about it, and the fish has to jump back in the water at a certain time, and so for our stories, you create a world, but you have to be true to that world, and it's really about how well you can stay true that I think builds the trust with the audience.
And working with that international, I mean, because obviously just Flying Bark has a very strong international connection, and the work that you make there can sometimes derive from origins outside and come to us in the same way that we work as co-producers. You work with content. And that content, if it has a very strong cultural dominant flavour, does that get watered down when you have to make it for an Australian, if you're making it as a content? Just thinking about working across continents.
Well, I think it's always a negotiation, and it's more about the broadcaster than it's necessarily about the audience. Working with ZDF, for example, in Germany, I think your experience was with ZDF Enterprises.
And ZDF.
And ZDF, okay. So, but I'm not sure how they are with a teenage show, and how much you had to adjust your stories because of them.
They didn't like our blue walls, but other than that, very supportive.
Okay, because we've had a lot of because typically in Australia we are a little bit more flamboyant and a little bit more comedic. When we did a show with that had TF1 in France and ZDF in Germany, and here in Australia, we had to do a lot of negotiation, because the Germans wanted everything very factual, the French people wanted it very emotional, and we wanted it to be very comedic. So those were really very torturous, long sessions to get a script that everybody could sign off on.
And just touching on what you said there about the different strengths or the different cultural influences that do come into play when you're working internationally. Coming in and working with Australian creatives, is there an observation as to, was there a style of storytelling that you could see was part of our cultural makeup?
Well, it's interesting. I first came to Australia in 1993 because I was producing the Ren and Stimpy show, and we were working with a studio in Canada, but at that time the Australian dollar was quite low. And so there was an opportunity, because we needed to produce a lot of episodes. So we hired Dean Taylor and Mr. Big, and in fact a lot of the artists who are still working at Flying Bark today had their start at Mr. Big, and back in the old Hanna-Barbera studios, and then there was the Disney studios in Sydney. What's interesting is that Australia has a really deep bench in terms of animation and doing animation for the world. And I think it's because of the comedy primarily. It's that really sharp, cutting down the tall poppies comedy that. Yes, I think, and so that really worked well for us. And then of course there was the Disney Studios here, and I worked on several projects with the Disney Studios here as well. So I've actually been coming to Australia for over 20 years. So it was really easy to come back here because I had a group of animators and artists and writers that I had worked with before.
It's 4:30.
Oh, we've got plenty of time. Okay, fantastic. Did you want to show anything?
Well, yeah. So we have two clips. The first one is from Maya the Bee, which is a feature film that'll be released this November. We're part of an international group, and that group was sort of the classic media of Europe. So if you know of Classic Media, which was recently bought by DreamWorks, they basically owned about 200 different IP, and we had the same issue with our company in Europe, and because they bought the old EM Entertainment. So in that were all of these incredibly famous stories, which you and I have never heard of. So it's, Maya the Bee, Vic the Viking, Heidi, some people might know about. And so our job was to find a way to make that relevant and contemporary and find a way to bring it, into the current
and for a new
time.
audience.
And definitely for a new audience, certainly. And part of that is by bringing it into 3D and giving it, the full treatment. And then the second clip is from Tashi, which is a wonderful series of Australian books. And actually, I was just talking to Stu, and Stu actually worked on the original development of the show back 10, 12 years ago. And then when I first came to Australia and found the books, I was really excited by them. And so we optioned the property, which had been optioned by 5 different companies, I think, even Animal Logic and several other people had tried. And it was really a year and a half and more money than I want to talk about of trying to figure out a way to tell that story. And ultimately, we figured it out by bringing, the main character of the story is a tall tale teller. And so he has a friend named Tashi that he's always telling these great tall tales about, which are kind of a mumble jumble of European fairy tales and characters like the Golem and Baba Yaga and giants and ogres. And so what we did was we took Jack and we put him in the exotic world of Tashi's. And so he gets to be our entry point into that world because Tashi lives quite an unusual life. In the first book, his parents sell him to a warlord for, basically for dinner. And, so it's quite a dark story. And so we had to try to find a way to make that, much more approachable.
And part of that challenge, obviously, it's a very complex world, and it's
yes,
a world
over 80
really
characters that we had to design, and
there was a lot of challenges to try and adapt. Whilst it was, because it's sold, how many millions of books has it sold?
Well over almost 2 million books in 22 languages, primarily in Australia. I mean, that's the biggest audience, but very big, for example, in Taiwan, of all places. And actually, we were very excited because 2 weeks ago, Angelina Jolie at the Maleficent opening was asked what fairy tale she reads, and she says, well, I'm reading my children Tashi. So it was great because she was here, for 2 months, so she picked up the books and loves them. So we're going to try to figure out a way to turn that into, right. But anyway, so go ahead and play the 2 clips together.
Got it. What?
Cut! Reset, everybody!
Sorry, I've done it again. I promise I'll get it right for the movie.
This is just a promo that we're using online.
seeing the world for the first time.
I like you. You got guts.
Oh, Willie, you're my best friend ever. You're the best.
That's it. Any more huts and we'd be a village. Ha! We're out! And picking up bee vibes. Something else, too. Kinda strong smelling. Pollen? Is it pollen? It is bees. There's always pollen. That's gotta be pollen. Pollen! Come to Papa! This doesn't smell like pollen. And it certainly doesn't taste like pollen.
Oh, it's really turned out so much better than I could have thought.
I like to dream. Yes, yes, right between the sound machine. On a cloudy cloud, I drift in the night. Any place it goes is right. Goes far, lightning. Stars away from him. You don't know what we could find. Why don't you come with me, little boy, on a magic carpet ride? You don't know what we could see. Why don't you tell your dreams to me? Fantasy will set you free. Close your eyes, boy. Look inside, boy. Let that sound take you away. Last night I found a Aladdin's lamp, so I wish that I could stay before that thing would end for me. Someone came to put that lamp away. I looked around, last candle's all I found. You don't know what we could find. Why don't you come with me, little boy, on a magic carpet ride? You don't know what we could see.
And I should just say we don't have the rights to that song, so that's just a B2B presentation.
That's quite intimidating. That's pretty amazing to watch. But what struck me when I was looking at that, and what might be interesting for the audience, is that obviously content that we make is very expensive to produce. Obviously, to produce to the quality that you see on the screen there, that's got to work against, internationally. It's got to work on lots of different platforms. The script, and coming back to the original idea, is obviously extremely important, because there's just no room for the cutting room floor to have anything on it.
Right. Well, I have to say we were very fortunate on Tashi to be working with Chris Rose at the ABC, and because of the television rules, we're co-producing it with Channel 7, and they don't really give any editorial advice, but they did have a real sharp deadline of the end of this year to have aired all of the episodes. So we had an incredibly short time schedule of just under 18 months to produce 50 to 11-minute episodes. And but Chris was amazing in giving terrific notes all the way through script, through animatic, and now through final animation. And I think that's also really key, is having a broadcaster that's on board with you and is making the same show you're making.
And quite often, because you don't get that golden pot of gold or money to actually get going, is that you're actually making the show at the same time as you're producing it.
Yes.
So you're actually, quite often you're writing, and 6 months into the process you're seeing the first bit of animation, and you've often finished writing the whole series. So you really have to make sure that it's working in the script.
Right.
And
Well, we also have, I mean, an amazing production team and a pipeline, and we've had the advantage of the last 5 years of really building that pipeline and the kind of native intelligence in the studio. So we have teams of people that have been working together on many shows, and I think that's a big part of it, is working really efficiently.
And just on that note of scripts, you know, that traditional model, when people they talk about Pixar, they have that non-traditional model where they work in the old Disney way of the storyboard being plotted out. And Stu, you were saying that Jukes had no scripts.
Yeah, we wanted. I mean, a lot of the cartoons made in the Nick Studios or Cartoon Network, where they do the board-driven process, and the Jukes was an opportunity for us to do that, to literally start with an outline and then go to storyboard and work things out and make it as funny as it could be possible in the animatic, rather than being structured by a script. And because they had no dialogue, it was a chance to do that.
So you had a plot outline that was approved, but it didn't have a very clear beginning, middle and end. It was just an idea.
Yeah, I think Bernadette from the ACTF is still here. I'd send her a one-liner. She was partners on that as well, which would be the Dukes go to the Wild West. But I think everyone was really confident that it would be funny. Hey, that's a funny idea, rather than the detail of the plot at that point. And then we could structure the story with gags. But sometimes, because they were short, they were 3-minuters, the board artist would ring me and say, hey, I've only done the first sequence and I'm a minute and a half in, and okay, let's change this, change that, and we had that ability to change, which you wouldn't be able to do on a 11-minute.
And it did start as a shorter format. They weren't 3 minutes to begin with, were they?
No, they were 45 seconds.
45 seconds, and that was through an interstitial...
Yes, for the ABC3.
For the ABC. So,
When
I mean, that's
launched.
an interesting way of moving into a story, or, you know, doing the kind of level of production that we do. You can imagine is a massive pipeline. It's big production schedules. You need lots of people who really know the process. But there's lots of different ways into connecting to your audience. And, I mean, Dukes was done as 45 seconds, and it found a fan base. And then it became, how many 3-minute episodes?
Yeah, we've only 23-minuters, so compared to a traditional, 50 to 11, but each one is like we think of it as each one is a little short film. And, so they're quite laboured over those animatics to get the timing right. And, the most fun I've had on the show. The only thing is the voice actor comes in at the end and all he's allowed to do is grunt, so... And anytime he almost sounds like he's saying something in English, we go, no.
So that would have made the show sell well internationally. There was no dubbing at all.
We'll find out.
Not yet. Jason, you made some interesting shorter format shows where you kind of shook up the format, or taking a format by putting the preschoolers in the host position, which was quite an unusual thing. Can you tell us about working on those shows, because they were quite short formats too?
Yeah, our first ever series was a show called Cooking for Kids with Lewis, and it was a 5-year-old chef, and he taught kids how to cook simple recipes. And then we did another show, and that was really well received. It won a couple of Astra Awards, and then it was on Nickelodeon. And then we did Gardening for Kids with Maddie, which was the same format, a 5-minute with Maddie, a little gardener who'd teach kids how to garden. She was 6. And then from that we actually developed a half-hour format, which had a gardener, a scientist, a chef and a craftsman, hosted by 2 kids in the studio. And look, it was a lot of fun, and the kids were great to work with. It was a difficult show to produce. A lot of the labour restrictions with children, we could only have them for 4 hours a day, twice a week, so we'd really take advantage of school holidays when that would come around. And it was a very, very trim crew, because in that sort of space, in the preschool space, we had Channel 7 as a main broadcaster. In the first series we had Nickelodeon as a secondary broadcaster, and in the second series we had Disney as a secondary broadcaster. So it was about just cobbling together the money to actually make it. And it was an interesting show to work on. A lot of fun to be able to work with the kids, and a lot of the script ideas would come just from research. A lot of research, and really it was really fast turnaround. So we'd be writing lots and lots of scripts. I think we did 160 interstitials on that show. Yeah, so a lot.
And that kind of leads to that question that we all have, is budget and dictating quality. There was a question earlier about what would you do if you had an unlimited budget, and remember years ago when I was a student, I read a book and that question was asked to a lot of very big filmmakers, and a lot of them, except Peter Greenaway, said that they couldn't work without a budget. Peter Greenaway said, of course, oh, I would make this fantastic big opera and it would have all this cast. But a lot of the Scorsese, Coppola, Jane Campion, a lot of the people said that the budget constraints were part of the storytelling mechanism that they had to do, and it actually allowed them to create more freedom in a way because they knew what the boundaries were. So do you find when you get the story and you have the budget, is that, obviously it's affecting what you can, do you have to be inventive about how you can tell the same story but with the limited amount of money?
I think the most creative thing you do as a producer is use your resources, you know, and what are those resources? And oftentimes it's the limitations that give, you know, brainchild to some creative solution. And, you know, I was thinking of Daly in the session before and how smart, you know, to go out and do it yourself in your parents' garage. I'm sure a lot of the humor and a lot of the creativity comes out of that kind of limitation. I think a lot of trouble you see with these big giant movies today that, you know, bomb is that, you know, there's nobody saying no to some of these directors, and you know, you wish somehow they would be a little bit more contained, but I don't know.
And Joanna, with obviously having just done a very massive amount of work on 3 series, has that affected the way that you'll be doing new shows? Are you dreaming smaller because it was harder?
No, I just want more money to do it, so it's easier. It's funny with the budget. I find that raising the budget to do your show is sort of a creative process as well, because you can have an idea and you're absolutely desperate to make it. At one stage, we thought that we would do Dance Academy as part of this distinctly Australian fund, which meant that you didn't have to get an international pre-sale, and it was a much, much lower budget. We just wanted to make the show, so we absolutely would have done it with that. But then when we got Germany and ZDF involved, we realised the scope of the show could change, and then it was originally devised for Melbourne, because that's where the Australian Ballet School is, and then ZDF came on board and said, well, we'll only do it if you shoot in Sydney. And suddenly we had more money, and we're in Sydney. We thought, well, if you want Sydney, we're going to have helicopters, we're going to do the lot, we're going to make this show enormous. And we didn't quite have the budget to do what we wanted in the first series, so luckily we got a second series. But then we had a bit of a bigger budget, and we were able to really be I mean, you never have enough money, we always wanted more, but we had enough to do what we could imagine, and we could look at a script and think, this script needs more, let's put them on wires, and let's do, you know, we could really, you know, make these big sequences that the show needed.
And that's kind of what gave it a sparkle. I mean, that taking it out of Melbourne and putting it to Sydney from the international perspective was show the sparkle, show the big, you know, show
absolutely.
And that became a character in the series.
Yeah, we made it a character. If you're making a show about ballet now, it just makes sense to me that, of course, do it near the Opera House. It's stunningly gorgeous, and the whole point of one of the main things about the show is it's aspirational, and it's such an aspirational setting as well as the aspirational goals of the characters.
Fantastic. Now, I think we are now getting closer to the end, so I wanted to throw it out to the audience to see if you had any questions for these very clever people up here. Or we can ask more questions amongst ourselves. Any questions about storytelling?
The story really is about the Australian system. Is there any way of taking it to that particular, to the universal? Any tips?
I mean, I feel like this might not be speaking specifically to comedy, and you guys would be a better place, but I think the specificity of Australian stories is what helps it travel as well. I've worked in series before where we don't ever say we're Australian, we try to be very non-specific, so it could be anywhere. Certainly with Dance Academy, you can, in Sydney, you know, we're not going to pretend we're not, and that was what helped it really travel. And if you look at something like, you know, like Boag, the Danish political series, it travels because it's specific to the country. So I feel like that can actually be a real positive in the international marketplace. But speaking
No, I completely agree. And I mean, I think funny is funny. You know, I don't know that there's an Australian joke that wouldn't read somewhere else. And remember, in animation, we're doing primarily visual humor. So, I mean, a lot of times, you know, the joke is very obvious and physical. But in terms of I can't think of anything that's specifically Australian that wouldn't travel. Obviously, voice is a big problem. I mean, for example, on Maya, we'll have an Australian cast, you know, with wonderful people like Jackie Weaver and Richard Roxburgh, but Jackie Weaver and Richard Roxburgh don't actually mean anything in the United States, so it'll be a completely different cast. Same thing in every other territory it'll be released in, they'll try to put local actors into it. So sometimes voice is an issue and things do have to be revoiced, but I don't know, I think funny is funny. And specificity, I agree, is, Fireman Sam is, you know, it's about that Welsh little place, and that's what makes it kind of cool.
I mean, Colin South's just had his series Flaming Thongs start up on the ABC, which is so Australian. So it'll be really interesting to see how well that travels, and I think it will because it's funny and it's good.
Yeah, it's like Family Guy in Australia. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, I think also that it depends on where your audience or where you think that's going to be as well, because I think you can have a sensibility which is distinctly cultural. The series, and it feeds on that world, so we're all kind of feeding back into that. And it is, you know, kids, a lot of the, I think we all have been outside of the culture and what that's like. It's kind of got those pathways historian. Your Dance Academy was drawing upon strong accents and quite experiences. Voices do need to have the same experience, so you're drawing upon real experience. We don't hear that, but understanding the market, you do hear that. These children are quite often different generations. There are different influences in their world. So I think issues that they face with some shows is that literally what you're doing, but also just do what your story. They just didn't have enough.
And you know, I mean, when I was at Disney and Nickelodeon, we did a lot of focus group testing, and typically it fed much more into marketing than it did into actually making the show. I mean, we might tighten up a scene a little bit, we might hurry it along a little bit, because we used to film the kids watching the movie, and we would do that in story reel, and so that was pretty effective. And I think movies are a little bit of a bigger, more, you know, cumbersome undertaking, so you have to be a little bit more careful, I guess. But
so we just had to
but
make
I
sure
agree. If you're not enjoying it, then
to just rather than
I don't think the audience will be there.
Yeah, I also think it depends what you're making. Like, so when we got our second series of All for Kids Commission, we know that even though there was precedent, Disney did a lot of focus group testing before they said yes to us. And with the app, Junior Storytellers, we did a lot of research and to make sure that we were hitting the target market, number one, to make sure that we weren't giving them things that were too difficult to do. Also, we had to research how they interact with us, and we did a lot of testing. We tested over 100 kids. And use that feedback to actually better the app and add new features and things.
Mid-Atlantic accent, and for me, you know, growing up, Fat Albert and other shows like that, I think of a lot of cartoon, all the Warner Brothers stuff. I think of that as a cartoon voice. I don't necessarily, you know, some of the things we've worked on haven't necessarily started in that age group. They've changed along the way. I worked a show called CJ the DJ that started as an adult. You know, it was, in our head it was an adult teen thing. It was going to be an online, but then along the way it aged down a bit, and you know, the designs, everyone thought the designs looked more like it would fit within a kid's space. So a lot of things changed for the audience, you know, within the audience during that development. It's trying to marry the story with the pictures and the words as well.
During our development, we didn't so much think about what did the audience want to see, but we really wanted to be truthful to the teenagers. So we did a lot of just meetings and chatting with them, bringing in people who were 15-year-olds and in the Australian Ballet, and we do that in our writers' room. We start off every series with a week-long workshop just to
but I think in a, say, a writers' room, if everybody's, you know, if everybody, or not even a writers' room, if everybody's laughing about
different experiences, so that we just could make sure that the stories that we were telling and had in our heads were still relevant. But where we didn't go too far with researching was
with a writer and they're saying, "Oh, do you think kids will
because it's going to change. The great thing with children's television and teen television is it can sell around the world and can continue to sell. So, you know, the series hopefully will still be screening in 20 years' time to find new audiences. So trying not to be too specific to the language of the
killing
teenager.
the joke. It's going to be funny. It's a monster that you put a stamp on and it has a tongue.
Kissing now, and you know, the number of different things, names that we got surname, we just made up
even though you say you don't do research,
kids started to use that, and now it's all changed. So
and you watch the shows that your peers are making. So
decided to create, do the research and be aware, and just make sure it was
take the stats and analyse them.
Because I think the
target specific. But
we're
you
making
need to-
content. I think that
Stu loves
I'm
the
not sure how
content
many of you
that he makes.
have
and
known
sits
much
within a
about the
world
kids space
which is loved by
before coming to
kids.
this conference.
So
I
think
we've
just naturally researching
Yeah,
Australian
you're right.
content.
It's when the latest, a new cartoon
just
will come out,
collectively,
Gravity
the work
Falls
that
or
we've
anything like
produced
that.
has
Me and
travelled
my
to so many
people
continents and countries
work with, they're all like,
so many different
have you seen that
languages.
episode?
And you
Have
just
you
don't
watched that
get
show? And we're all trying to...
much more one in the media as to how Australian content connects to kids all over the world.
And adult drama producers have no idea. We're Dance Academy's in 166 countries now, and that's it's a lot. And adult drama series just don't traditionally travel as well. And Dance Academy is one of many, many, many series of Australia that has just travelled so far, and it's really well known. Australia's really well known internationally for really high quality children's and teen drama.
So I recall talking to a French-Canadian broadcaster with a very small territory who was telling me about the quality of Australian drama and shows, and the reason so they have obviously access to Canadian content, they have access to French content because their audience is French-speaking, but she was telling me that they would buy an Australian drama over a French drama and redub it because culturally the sensibility was more aligned to their audience, and they felt that Australians have got such a good storytelling. They tell really good stories, and they would do all that work over buying a show that they could just show and not have to dub.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Yeah.
It is me, I have the microphone.
Oh, no.
Regular question asker. Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's not surprising. Should know that. I used to be in those. Hello. All right. You're all great storytellers, but it's been really interesting over these 2 days to hear really quite inspiring examples from speakers like Daly and Hoodlum about coming up at the writer's room point with these multi-platform stories and stories that are told out across many different touch points is a good way to describe it. Traditionally still, though, linear storytelling is the mode that we seem to see a lot. And the scale of this type of interesting story development that Hoodlum and Daly are working on, you don't see very often. What would it take for you to start working in that way? Is it up to broadcasters to start asking and funding that type of activity, or will it evolve in a natural way? Because we were having these conversations 7, 8, 9 years ago, and I remember that Town Motel, and I thought it's all going to be like that in 5 years. It's not happening at the rate you'd expect. What would take you to start working like that?
Well, actually, I mean, for me, just being here, I've been a little bit inspired by the discussion, and it really is, it does take the broadcaster, obviously, but you've got to have, you've got to set aside a fairly significant budget. I mean, I think what the Dumpling show that has $750,000 for making those games, I mean, that's a lot of money out of the budget, and certainly not something that broadcasters are fronting up, and not something that, even Ingenious or other funding companies want to write a check for. So it is kind of a combination, but I'm pretty excited about the idea of doing more in that space, because I do think it's just part of telling the story.
I think naturally concepts need to be told in different ways, and I feel like for me it would be just naturally if the concept wants to be told in that way, and that's the best way to do it. It's certainly encouraged if there's money to do it, but yeah, I think for me Dance Academy was always a narrative storytelling, but then ABC3 were very keen on a big website to support it, and I'm so glad that was pushed, because it was hugely important for us being able to renew the series in some territories, because they knew the website worked really well, even if the show hadn't quite found its audience because of time slot issues and things like that. So the web, that sort of thing was incredibly important, but there was money to do that too.
I think it's also could be interesting the way that obviously reality television is framing that need for us to have the world reflected back to us. Social media, you can say you get up. I read someone Facebook the other day, they got up to feed their cat and they were saying, ha ha, I'm going back to bed. I'm like, well, good, but 4:30 in the morning, really? So I think part of the appeal of that traditional model, I think, is still that connection to the audience, that you're being taken somewhere that they're not in control of. And I think that I can understand in a way why that growth of that is maybe slow, and that you are finding ways to be innovative with that new way of storytelling. But I mean, obviously, big shows like Game of Thrones, which has connected so broad an audience, and people are waiting for it to come out, and they're paying for it to come out. I think that part of the big shift in that, I remember being at a conference a few years ago where they were talking about, it was actually at UTS in Sydney, and it was all about the way kids are consuming and that they want stuff for free. So in our time, there's been a premium model, but that audience wants a freemium model. They want it for free. But that was a couple of years ago. They were talking about the way to maybe, and you can't make stuff for free. If you've been to any YouTube conferences, you can see that the people on the panels are making and have an audience. They might have a subscription audience of 1 million plus, but their desire is to be making traditional format where they actually can be in control of budget and not have to be the director, the actor, the editor, put it on and feed that machine from an advertising revenue.
Yeah, I also wonder as well from a producer's perspective, because not all stories have to start in the traditional manner. So you start a story on an iPhone or on a tablet, but as producers, and especially this is a question to you guys, I guess, is how much are you driven towards the TV show, because that is the bigger budget thing. That's where you're going to get the most of your money, and that's where you're going to be able to create what you really want to create. As opposed to, say, starting with something really small and growing it organically and growing the story from something that's platform agnostic and maybe starting it on a mobile phone and building an audience and then growing it from there into a multi-platform story. So I'm just wondering, did you gravitate towards
you look at someone like Josh Selig, who did, I think it was Small Potatoes, where he just started with one episode, and then there was a big YouTube thing, and there was and it's just grown and grown and grown, and now it's a show. And so I do think that model can work, but and sometimes it's a good place to do development. In fact, Amazon is now doing that, where you actually put your Bible and your animatic up on the screen, and they have 6 or 8 of them, and then from those they chose 3 that they're taking to series. So I mean, there's a lot of different models out there right now.
And I think it's a great way if you're not getting that immediate yes from the network, which to be honest is really hard to get. Maybe there is another way, and maybe it is that you do a web series, or you have the 1 minute clip, or an initial no from the network, if you're really passionate about a show, can't be the end of it. There must be different ways in, and there are so many more ways. Even 10 years ago, there really weren't all these opportunities, and I feel like now is really exciting, and there are different ways of getting in.
And it is about not waiting for the money to come. It's about, if you're the storyteller, make the stories and, find the audience. But I've been given the death signal, so it is time to kill the panel and say thank you very much. And I hope you guys got a lot out of it. You certainly got your money's worth over these 2 days. So good luck with everything.